ברוכות הבאות, ladies, ברוכות הנמצאות, and I welcome all the viewers that are logging, whether it's onto Torah Anytime or ohelSarah.com, the amazing exclusive Torah site for women. It's amazing how you all venture out or log on whenever it's possible, whether it's in your cars or in your kitchens or wherever it is in your headphones, to tune in to Divrei Torah. Ashrechem benot Yisrael. Fortunate are you that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you the zechut and the inspiration and the want to come closer to Him, to listen to His words, to infuse your life with tremendous strengths, wisdom, and brachot. You should know that learning Torah, even as a woman, brings, especially in this generation, will bring you tremendous berachot and yeshuot. In the olden days, many years ago, I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago, maybe even thousands of years ago, it wasn't necessary for a woman to sit and learn Torah, so to speak, to engage in Torah. But in this generation, where unfortunately we have a decline of spirituality, it is so important for a woman, because she's the ikar of the house, she is the center of the home, to do as much as she can. Yes, to be involved in Torah, yes, to go to a shiur, to tune in if she can, and to learn HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, so that she could then bring all of that influence into the home, teach her kids, and create a foundation in the Bait that is a foundation based on Torah values, on spirituality. So Ashrechem, fortunate are you, ladies, that you want to learn Torah, that you make efforts to learn Torah, and Be'ezrat Hashem, all of your efforts are going to be repaid through your children, because you're going to see through their deeds all of your good work. This past Motzei Shabbat, I had to sadly, very sadly, make a shiva call to an old-time friend who lost her husband, lo alenu. He was only 47 years old and passed away from a sudden heart attack on Chag HaShavuot. It was a real tragedy. He left an almana with 4 children. Now, I remember that when this friend got married many years ago, just a few months into her marriage, she and her husband began to invite people for Shabbat. Now, hosting guests is a beautiful mitzvah, and in the Hasidic circles, at least at that time in the mid-90s, newly married couples didn't host anybody during Shana Rishona. Many Hasidic couples make it a point to be invited out, whether it's to their in-laws or to their parents. I'm not saying it's the right thing necessarily. A Shana Rishona, you should mainly be at home, not out. But this couple over here insisted on honoring their home with guests. And I was a lucky one. I was one of those guests. And I want to tell you that this friend of mine's husband, who just passed away, this friend of mine's husband, he made me feel so welcomed. I never felt uncomfortable in their home. This man treated every guest with kindness, grace, and respect. And that was unusual for a Hasid in the 90s. I'm not saying they're not, God forbid, that they're not machnise ochim, lefech, the big balei tzedakah and big balei chesed, the Hasidic people. But most Hasidim, male Hasidim, in those days, wouldn't be caught dead talking to their female guests, which I could completely understand, and we spoke about this the last shiur. We have to honor tzniut. But this Hasid over here understood that certain guests need an encouraging word and a positive feeling. And he was able to provide it with modesty, maintaining his tzniut, with refinement and honor. This was a man with an exceptional nature who was extremely devoted to chesed and to his family. He was a committed husband and a loving father. So when I found out the news concerning Israel Moshe ben Ephraim Betzalel's, alav shalom's, untimely passing, I was at a loss for words. And indeed, it is a loss. It's a loss for Am Yisrael. It's a loss for the Hasidic community that he belonged to. When something like this happens, there are many questions and no answers. One simply has to accept the fact that these are all cheshbonot shamayim. We have to understand that a person's birth and his passing from this world is all in the hands of the Ribono Shel Olam. He's the one who decides the exact hour that a person will be born to this world, and he decides the exact time that the person will leave this world. The neshama is in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if we could understand that our neshama is being cared for, maintained, and gently handled by its maker, there's great comfort in that. I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to know, Hashem is taking care of my neshama. And it's leading it to its final destination. And that has to bring some comfort to a person's life. And we hope that this shiur that is dedicated Le'ilui Nishmat Israel Moshe ben Ephraim Betzalel will give his wife, his children, and family some comfort while providing an aliyah for the neshama. Ruach Hashem tanichenu began Eden. So I'll begin this shiur by saying that there are certain things in this world that the human mind cannot comprehend. For example, give an example. In space, there is a concept called light years. What's a light year? A light year is the distance that light travels in 1 year. What's the distance that it travels in 1 year? In 1 year, the light. If you take the number of seconds in 1 year, now listen to this, ladies, you're not going to believe this. If you take the number of seconds in 1 year, which is 31,536,000 seconds in a year, and you multiply it by the number of miles that light travels in 1 second, which is 186,000 miles in 1 second, the total is 5.88 trillion miles. That's how far 1 light year is. Can you imagine? Human beings can't comprehend such a big number. For us, when we travel on a transatlantic flight to China, that's 12,000 miles away. It seems like an endless journey. And that's not even close to a light year, which is 5.88 trillion miles away. A light year is trillions of miles long. Now think about it. After 6 hours on a plane, we're already on the edge of our seats, and it's only 12,000 miles that we're traveling. Could you imagine trying to travel to a place that's 5.88 trillion miles away? You could try to do the math, how long it would take you to get there. I think about 10 years. I don't know. Figure it out. The mathematicians could figure it out. Email me. I'd be interested to know. Ladies, our minds shut down after we reach a certain level of understanding. The same is true when we try to understand some of the personalities that the Torah HaKadosha writes about. To try to explain who Moshe Rabbeinu was is beyond us. The magnitude of such a man, the greatness of such a superhuman being is beyond human comprehension. It's too difficult to describe, too difficult to depict and explain. And far be it from us to try to understand or measure the level of Tanaim or Amoraim that are written in the Gemara. As a matter of fact, the rabbis of the Gemara themselves made the following comment about the previous generation, the generation before them. What did they say? They said, Im rishonim kemalachim. If the previous generation of rabbis were like angels, anu kebnei adam, then we're just like simple human beings. And these were great people. And then they said, Im rishonim kebnei adam. But if the previous generation of Rabbanim are going to be likened to simple human beings, then anu hamorim, then we're like donkeys compared to them, and not regular donkeys, by the way, because even concerning donkeys, there are levels of donkeys. As a matter of fact, the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair's donkey was so careful not to eat anything that wasn't kosher. So the Gemara is telling us that even one generation of Amoraim is like the difference either between an angel and a human being, or the difference between a man and an animal. Could you imagine? It's not only a quantitative difference, it's a qualitative difference. It's not that they were great people, it's a whole different level of people. You're talking about the difference either between a person and an angel or a person and an animal. And that's only one generation of Amoraim that they were referring to. So imagine the distance between us and a man like Moshe Rabbeinu, alav shalom. There are no words in our vocabulary that can describe the astronomical distance between us and the rabbis of long ago. Now, why am I telling you this? Because in this week's Parshat, we read one of the greatest compliments and praises that our Torah gives to the ultimate leader, Moshe Rabbeinu. The Pasuk says, והאיש משה ענב מאוד מכל האדם אשר על פני האדמה. And the man, Moshe, was the most humble man that ever walked the face of the earth. There's no one that was as humble as Moshe Rabbeinu before he appeared on the scene, and no one in the future who will be as humble as he was. So let's talk about humility. There's a story of a rabbi who heard that there was a priest in the neighborhood who was exceedingly humble. So the rabbi wanted to see this with his own eyes because he was a little skeptical. So he went to the priest's house, and the priest answered the door with his head down in an extremely humble manner. And the rabbi says to the priest, I came to ask you a question. So the priest says, oh, you came to see me? I can't believe it. But me? I'm not so smart. I have no wisdom. I have no intellect. This priest was speaking like a humble person, like an anav. The rabbi was suspicious. So he said to him, can I come in? The priest said, of course, please come in. He showed him in, took his coat, he hung it up. He even served him something to drink. And then he tells the rabbi, please forgive me that you had to go out of your way. You really need to come to me. I should have come to you. A very humble attitude. So the rabbi says, look, I have one question over here. Do you read the Old Testament? And the priest says, of course I read it. And the rabbi says, well, are you familiar with the pasuk about Moshe Rabbeinu being the most humble man that ever lived? And the priest says, of course, I read those words. And the rabbi says, so my question is like this. How could that be possible that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble of men? Because it seems to me that you are even more humble than Moshe Rabbeinu. So the priest scratched his head and he tells the rabbi, to tell you the truth, rabbi, that question has been bothering me for years now. So much for Anava. Ladies, we have no concept of what the Torah Kedosha means when it describes Moshe Rabbeinu as the most humble of men. We have no idea. I will tell you that there was a great rabbi who lived about 100 years ago called the Chafetz Chaim alav shalom. He was the author of the Mishnah Brura and other svarim on the subject of Lashon Hara. He was a great rabbi. But the Chafetz Chaim, he wore simple clothes. He wore a simple cap. He was indistinguishable. He never allowed anybody to serve him. He shunned the idea of kavod. He ran away from honor and prestige like it was a disease. One time, when he entered the yeshiva in Simchat Torah, the boys were so excited to see him, they started to sing him the words, Tzadik Tamar Yifrach. And the Chafetz Chaim was cringing away. He said, no one knows the pain that I have to endure in order to come to the yeshiva and dance with the boys on Simchat Torah. I walk into the yeshiva and I have to hear them calling me a tzaddik. That's painful to me. It caused the Chafetz Chaim anguish. That's a rabbi who lived 100 years ago. But the Torah is telling us that Moshe Rabbeinu was more humble than the Chafetz Chaim. Could that be? I mean, look at who the Chafetz Chaim was and how careful he was concerning humility. We can't understand it, but these are the facts. That's what the Torah tells us. There was a great and holy rabbi and mekubal called the Rashash, alav shalom, Rabbi Shalom Sharabi from Teman. He became the Rosh Yeshiva of one of the most prestigious institutions of Kabbalah in Eretz Yisrael called Yeshivat Bet El. But the Rashash, you should know, wasn't always the Rosh Yeshiva. He began as the Shamish of the Yeshiva, sweeping the floors, serving the rabbis their tea, cleaning up the Sfarim and arranging them. One day, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Gedalia Chayun alav shalom, was giving a shiur in matters of Kabbalah, and he reached a very difficult passage in a sefer titled Etz Chaim. The Rosh Yeshiva himself was struggling to figure out what the Ari HaKadosh alav shalom meant in this sefer. All the students were breaking their heads trying to figure it out. The greatest geniuses in mysticism couldn't crack the code of this difficult passage in Kabbalah. So eventually they took a recess for lunch. The holy Rashash, who was there in the room and listening to the shiur, while everybody was out of the room, he went to the Rosh Yeshiva's book. He took out a pencil, and on the side of the book, he wrote the entire explanation of this complicated passage in Kabbalah. And then he closed the book and left it there. When the Rosh Yeshiva came back from lunch, he opened the sefer and he saw the notes inside. And he read everything and he says, wow, this is genius. This is the answer to the subject we've all been struggling with. But who wrote this in my book? A man who saw the Rashash secretly writing in the Rosh Yeshiva's book, he stood up and he told Rabbi Chayun, he says, oh, the Shamash was the one who wrote in your book. Shamash? What does the Shamash know about Kabbalah? But on that day, the greatness of the Rashash was revealed, and eventually he became the Rosh Yeshiva. This is humility. The Rashash was so great in learning. He was a genius, but he was unassuming and he was modest. He didn't boast. He gave the impression of such simplicity. No one knew his greatness until that day. And the Torah HaKadosha tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu was more humble than the Rashash HaKadosh. It's hard to imagine, but that's what the Torah is telling us. There was another rabbi called Reb Shmelka from Nikolsburg, alav shalom. He was once invited to deliver a shiur at an inauguration ceremony, and he asked if he could please have a few private moments to himself before he addresses the audience. So he went into a room and he closed the door. The Talmidim put their ear to the door to listen to what the rabbi was doing or saying in that room so they could learn from him. What did they hear him say? They heard him say the following: "We would like to introduce the great tzaddik, the chassid and holy man, a man who is brilliant in Torah and is a pure person. It is our honor to call upon Reb Shmelka from Nikolsburg." Wow, the students couldn't believe it. The Rav was speaking such praises about himself. I mean, hello? When Reb Shmelka came out of the room, the students approached him and they said, "Rebbe, please forgive us for what we heard, but can you explain what that was all about?" And Reb Shmelka said, "When a person praises himself, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds foolish. And in a few minutes, they're going to say all these things about me, and I didn't want it to affect me. So I said all those words to myself in order to make it sound ridiculous so that when they praise me in the next few minutes, it's not going to affect me." That's true anava. That's true humility. And guess what? Moshe Rabbeinu was more humble than Reb Shmelka. And I'm sure that these rabbis that we've been talking about so far, they would admit that they weren't as great as Moshe Rabbeinu in the area of anava. Even though when I read the stories of these rabbis, I don't see how you could be more humble than this. But Moshe Rabbeinu was, and we don't understand what that means. I'll tell you another story. There's a story of a great rabbi from Frankfurt called Rabbi Avraham Avush alav shalom. He was once collecting tzedakah for the yeshiva, and he traveled to a certain town that was known for its wealthy citizens. All these rich people were vacationing in a hotel somewhere. So Rabbi Avraham went to this hotel and he approached a wealthy man who was sitting there eating dinner. And he said to him, "Please, sir, help me. I need to collect funds for the yeshiva, for the institution." And the wealthy man started to badger the Rav. "What a chutzpah! Don't you see we're in the middle of eating? Show some respect. Don't you have any derech eretz? You interrupt people in the middle of eating?" And the rabbi said, "Oh, mechila, I apologize. I thought you were finished with your meal. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please forgive me." And the wealthy man let him have it, and he berated him for 5 minutes. So the Rav couldn't handle it anymore. He was trying to get away from this embarrassing situation, and he made a run for the door. Suddenly, the rich man looks down and he notices, that his watch is missing. Oh no. He runs after the rabbi and he yells, "You Rasha! It's not enough you interrupted my dinner, but you also stole my watch. You're a crook. I demand that you give me back my watch." The Rav didn't know what to do. And he says, "I didn't take your watch. I don't know what you're talking about." And the rich man says, "No, you stole my watch and I want my watch back." And the rich man began to hit the rabbi, screaming at him that he should give him back his watch. People there didn't know what to do. They separated the rich man from the rabbi so that the rabbi could escape. Could you believe this? That week was Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat prior to Yom Kippur, and signs were plastered all over the town that Rabbi Avraham Avush, the great rabbi, is going to address the congregation. This rich man read the signs, And he never heard of Rabbi Avraham, but he wanted to attend the shiur before Yom Kippurim. He goes there and he sees hundreds of people are waiting for the rabbi to begin his speech. And who does the rich man see is getting up to address them? That rabbi! The rabbi that he beat up! The rabbi that he cursed! The rabbi that he accused of being a thief! And he doesn't know what to do with himself. He just wants to crawl under his chair. And Rabbi Avraham proceeded to deliver the most eloquent and riveting speech. And this man, this rich man, was sitting there ashamed and embarrassed and broken. And he turned to his friend and he says, how can I go into Yom Kippurim after what I did to this man? I didn't realize what a chash of a rabbi this was. How will I ever be forgiven for such a terrible avon? And his friend told him, listen, don't worry about it. All you have to do is approach the rabbi, apologize, and ask him for forgiveness. I'm sure that he's going to forgive you. He's not going to hold it against you, especially now before Yom Kippurim. Just tell him it was a misunderstanding. You didn't mean it. Don't worry about it. So when the Rav finished the shiur, the entire crowd stood up and wanted to honor him. And this rich man decided to approach the Rav on stage to offer an apology. Now, most people would think that when Rabbi Avraham sees this rich man coming towards him, what would he say? We would think that the rabbi would say, now you know who I am. You know who I am now. Remember you called me a thief? You called me a ganav? You know what? I forgive you. Machul, don't worry about it, but now you know who I am. But let me tell you what happened. When the rich man made his way up to the stage and Rabbi Avraham saw him, he started to scream on top of his lungs, I didn't take your watch. I really didn't take your watch. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Ladies, this man just delivered the speech of his life, and he still assumes that this guy wants his watch back. You know what that means? It means that Rabbi Avraham was totally numb from any of the kavod that he just received from the crowd. For him, nothing changed. Not before the speech and not after the speech. He was still the same person. That's anava. That's humility. The question is, what exactly is anava? What is humility? I mean, we understand it means running away from kavod, from honor, and not running after kavod. That's clear from the stories that we heard. But does it mean that humility requires you to say, I'm a nothing, I'm worthless, I'm a zero, I have no value? Is that what humility means and requires of you? I don't think so. The Mefarshim explain that humility means that a person recognizes his potential, his gadlut. He's aware of his God-given talents and strengths, but his thought process should be the following. He should be thinking, I'm gifted. Borei Olam bestowed upon me certain talents and potential, maybe even more than other people. But who says that I'm fulfilling my potential? Maybe if my talents and my strengths were given to my friend, my next door neighbor, he'd be able to achieve a lot more than me. Which means a humble man doesn't deny what he has or who he is. He's aware of what he has. He knows who he is. But at the same time, he wonders, maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I could do more. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that he was a great man. Now, how do I know that he knew he was a great man? Because there's a pasuk in the Torah that says the following: Velo kam navi kemoshe. There never was, nor will there ever be a prophet like Moshe Rabbeinu. And I ask you, who wrote that pasuk? Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem dictated to him exactly what to write in the Torah, so Moshe Rabbeinu was writing these words. So these words were words that Moshe Rabbeinu was transcribing about himself. These words are part of the Torah. And not only did he write these words, I'm sure he also had to teach them. Moshe Rabbeinu taught every pasuk in the Torah to the Jewish people. When Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching the masses Torah and he arrived at this pasuk about himself, you think he skipped the pasuk? Oh, never mind, that we're going to skip this one. No. Moshe had to teach and interpret every pasuk on the Torah on every level. When he arrived at this pasuk, he said out loud, Velo kam navi kemoshe, means, he was telling the people what it means, that even Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, isn't going to be greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Meaning in Nevuah. So did Moshe Rabbeinu know that he was so great? Most certainly yes. The Rambam Alav Shalom writes that the level of Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah was different than any of the Nevi'im in the history of our people. How so? First of all, he received his prophecy when he was awake. All the other Nevi'im received it either via a dream, when they were sleeping, or some kind of vision. Moshe Rabbeinu was wide awake when he received his Nevuah. That's number one. Secondly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu directly. Other Nevi'im didn't receive a direct Nevuah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rather, the Nevuah was transmitted through Malachim, through angels. But Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with HaKadosh Baruch Hu panim el panim. The third difference is that when a Navi begins to receive a message from Shamayim, he experiences epileptic seizures. He starts shaking and trembling, convulsion-like. That's how people knew that the Navi was now receiving a prophecy. But when Moshe Rabbeinu was receiving a Nevuah, it was as if he was talking with one of his friends, Kiviyachol. It was a very casual experience. He didn't tremble, he didn't fall down to the floor in an epileptic fit. There were no signs that Moshe Rabbeinu was now communicating with God. It was on the level of Ish Lere'ehu. That's number 3. And the fourth difference, according to the Rambam, is that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to receive Nevuah at any moment. Any time he needed to talk to Kadosh Baruch Hu, the lines of communication were open. Other Nevi'im had to actually prepare themselves before receiving the Nevuah, and then they had to wait for the Nevuah to actually be transmitted. But with Moshe Rabbeinu, every moment of the day he was ready to receive Nevuah. And Moshe Rabbeinu knew this. How do I know he knew this? Well, in this week's Parshat, a few men approached Moshe Rabbeinu with a problem that they had. They said to him the following. They said, Moshe, we were not able to bring a Korban Pesach this year. We were occupied with other mitzvot. We had personal issues that prevented us from bringing the Korban, but we still want to do it. Could we make it up? What does Moshe Rabbeinu say to them? He says, Amdu, stand right here before me. Eshme'a ma yedaber Hashem. Let me hear what God has to say on this subject matter over here. Wow. That means that Moshe Rabbeinu was confident enough to approach Hashem right there on the spot with any question and very confidently feel that he's going to receive an immediate reply. And Hashem answered him right away. He says, no worries, we are now going to institute something called Pesach Sheni. For all those people that didn't have a chance to bring a Korban Pesach, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't tell those men, you know what, let's see what happens with my nevuah. We're going to have to wait for God to decide if and when He's going to communicate with me, and then I'll let you know what He says. No. Moshe Rabbeinu pretty much told those men, I know that I'm a Navi, I know the level of my prophecy, and the level of my prophecy is such that I'm going to ask God right now, and He's going to answer me right now. So he knew his level. But the point is that the greatness of Moshe was that he always felt that because he had such strengths and talents, it means there's more responsibility. He always felt that perhaps he wasn't doing enough dafka because he was so great. Which means that because a person understands his greatness and strengths, he also has to understand that his obligations and responsibilities are that much greater. Moshe Feinstein, alav shalom, was one of the greatest poskim in modern history. Was he a humble man? No doubt. This isn't my testimony. It's the testimony of the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Koop. Rabbi Feinstein was once discussing a halachic issue concerning Siamese twins with someone who came to him with this problem. And what was the issue? They needed to separate the twins, and Rav Moshe needed to rule on this very difficult subject matter. How they're going to do it, what's going to happen, the ramifications. So Rav Feinstein said, listen, before I rule on this case, which is a very sensitive case, I need a professional, a doctor, to explain the biology to me. I need to hear from a doctor how it works. So they brought in the greatest doctor in the United States, the Surgeon General, Dr. Koop. The doctor sat with Rav Feinstein for 3 hours in his apartment on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, discussing the anatomy of Siamese twins. After 3 long hours, the doctor left the Rav's apartment and he said the following: in all my years as a surgeon, I've been on college campuses and I've spoken to various leaders and professors. I've spoken to scholars and men of academics. But in my entire life, I never met a man who possesses such godly brilliance coupled with humility. Dr. Koop saw the humility of Moshe Feinstein. But interestingly, the same man who was so humble once had to have a pacemaker put in, and before the procedure he said, you know, I need a little time to analyze something. After he considered whatever he considered, he says, you know what, you can proceed with the procedure. So one of the people, they asked him, they said, Rabbi, what did you have to consider and analyze? And Rav Moshe Feinstein said the following: Be'ezrat Hashem, when Mashiach comes, they are going to reinstate the Sanhedrin. And Chachamim write that in order for a rabbi to be eligible to sit on the Sanhedrin, he cannot have any kind of pigam, any kind of physical blemish. So I needed to make sure that this pacemaker isn't considered a blemish, because I might be one of those rabbis who one day will have the zechut to join the Sanhedrin. Wow. I mean, here we are saying how humble Moshe Feinstein was, but it seems from these words that he's showing off that he's going to sit on the Sanhedrin. So where's the humility? Where's his anava? The explanation is as follows. Rav Moshe Feinstein understood who he was. He was aware of all his gifts and the potentials that HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed him with. This was a man who knew where he stood. And therefore, yes, It's quite possible that he'll be Zoicha to sit on the Sanhedrin, and that's why he has to consider his current situation and come to a decision. But with all his greatness and all that potential, he was still able to remain modest because he always felt he could do more. There is a famous Gemara that tells us about one of the rabbis who was clinically dead and came back from death. So the Talmidim asked him, Rabbi, you were dead. You were in Olam Haba. Tell us what you saw. And the rabbi said, what did I see? Olam hafuch raiti. I saw a topsy-turvy world. Elyonim lemata, tachtonim lemala. I saw people that were considered great in this world, but in Olam Haba, they were not so revered. And I saw people that were considered lowly in this world, but in Olam Ha'emet, they were in a very high place. Everything was upside down. Olam hafuch. What does it mean? That there were people who were great here, but they were not considered so great up there. And those who were lowly down here were great up there. What does that mean? Chachamim explain that there could be a Talmid Chacham who's a great scholar in this world, but based on his potential and everything he could achieve in his lifetime, he didn't come close to what he could have accomplished. In this world, he was considered a great man and he received a lot of honor. But in the world of Emet, he was lowered in status because he didn't fulfill his ultimate potential. And then there was another man where in this world, he wasn't regarded as the smartest or wisest person. But based on his limited potential, he still managed to fulfill his calling. So we see that ultimately, we're not judged based on performance, but on how much we would have been able to accomplish, and if we did. That's why the tzaddikim are always scared, if they're real tzaddikim, because they know they contributed so much to Am Yisrael, but they're always wondering, if we wrote 10 Sfarim, could we have written 20? If we helped 100 people in our lifetime, could we have helped 500? If we did one chesed a day, could we have done 5? Maybe Hashem expected more from us. They're always scared. Such thinking creates humility in a person and maintains it. I want to end with this one thought, ladies. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot calls humility a garment. Umalbashto anava, and his garment is humility. Chachamim ask, what does it mean to wear humility, to wear anava? And the answer is that humility is like a garment, and that sometimes you have to remove it. You have to remove the garment. There are times when a leader has to take a stand and confront his community with some form of rebuke and speak out against certain practices that go against Torah values. Sometimes the leader will pound on the table and raise his voice. Sometimes harsh words will be spoken in order to save the people from the evils of this world. The rabbis or the rebbitzins out there must momentarily shed their humility in order to protect and save the people. Why am I telling you this? Because we are all leaders in some way or another. Umalbashto anava. Some of us are leaders of a shi'ur or a community. Some of us are leaders in our workplace. Some of you are leaders in your own home by virtue of the fact that you are mothers and fathers. But if you as a leader say, Who am I to say anything? I'm nothing. I'm a nobody. I'm not worthy. I should be the one to speak out and fight this battle? Ma'ani, machayai, who am I? I'm not fit. Ladies, this is false humility. Therefore, you have to know when to use anava and when to maintain it. You know, Shaul HaMelech alav shalom was the first king of Israel. He was commissioned by Shmuel HaNavi alav shalom to go out to war against Amalek. He was commanded to kill all of Amalek, including the animals. And just as he was about to kill the animals, Doeg HaAdomi tells him, Shaul, you know what? I don't think Shmuel meant that you should kill the animals. I think he meant you should bring them back and then sacrifice them on the Mizbeach. He meant that you should slaughter them there in our town on the altar. So what did Shaul do? He took his advice and he brought back all the animals with him. Shmuel HaNavi sees the animals and he says, what did you do? Why did you bring back these animals? Didn't I tell you to kill them? And Shaul said, well, I listened to Doeg, who told me what you really meant, that we should put on the animals on the Mizbeach and offer them as a korban. So Shmuel says, I don't understand. I gave you the prophecy because you are the king of Israel. Who told you to listen to every piece of advice that you hear on the street? And concerning this episode, the Gemara says, Al teheh tzaddik harbeh. Don't be such a big tzaddik all the time. Don't be such a tzaddik all the time, because Shaul's crime in this case was that he was much too humble. When Doeg tried to convince him to bring back the animals, Shaul HaMelech should have told him, listen Doeg, I am the king of Israel with all due respect. And Hashem gave me the prophecy and I don't understand it the way you understand it. Sorry, but we are killing the animals. That's that. Instead, he took a step back and he didn't want to argue with Doeg. He kept quiet and he defied the prophetic command of Shmuel HaNavi. Because of Shaul's misplaced humility, he lost the melucha. He lost the kingdom, his crown. Now next week, ladies, we are going to read about the meraglim, the spies who were sent by Moshe Rabbeinu to scout Eretz Yisrael. We're going to read about Hoshea ben Nun alav shalom and how his name was changed from Hoshea to Yehoshua. And all the Chachamim want to know why his name was changed. Why the name change? Now, I'm not going to reveal the details to you in this shiur because I'm going to give it to you next week, Be'ezrat Hashem. You're going to get the answer. I want you to be curious and tune in. But I will tell you this, that Hoshea ben Nun was exceedingly humble, and that's why his name had to be changed. And that's all I'm going to share with you, because I don't want to ruin it for you for next week. I want you to still stay curious. But the lessons we could learn from this shiur and implement is that humility doesn't mean that you deny the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you. You have to know your greatness. And at the same time, you have to realize that because of your greatness, it makes you accountable. Ve'ha'ish Moshe anav. Moshe was a man. He was a great man. But because he was such a great man, because he was an ish, he was an anav. That's what made him so humble. He knew that he was endowed with so many gifts. And he was always worried as to whether or not he was fulfilling his obligations. So our first responsibility is to realize how much more we're capable of doing. As parents and as leaders, our responsibility will be to remove the humility temporarily in order to take a stand and respectfully admonish in order to protect our families and communities. That's the lesson. So Yeh Ratzon, that the lessons we learned should stand first and foremost as a zechut for the niftar, who very interestingly his name is Yisrael Moshe ben Ephraim Betzalel alav shalom. Should be an aliyat neshama for him, and we hope that he will be a melitz yosher for his family, for all of Am Yisrael, and Be'ezrat Hashem, as the merit of his anava, Kadosh Baruch Hu should bring all of us yeshuot and nechamot bimhera. Amen. Ken Yeh Ratzon.